What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is trying to be a little more concise than usual. So before we start, check out both my books. They're online on Amazon. There's links in the description below. And be sure to check out Keyframe. It's how I'm making this video. Now this video will be looking at Liverpool versus Newcastle and looking at the tactics behind Liverpool's title charge as they take on Man City. The Man City video should be up later, so be sure to subscribe before that comes out so you get the updates on that. But now for the Liverpool Tactics, we see in their build-up phase, their two central defenders are being split by their goalkeeper Alisson. Then in the front three, we have the Newcastle players pressing a bit higher up the field in a 4-3-3, creating direct access to the three central players in Liverpool's first line of their initial build-up. Then to cope with this and to try and create stronger passing connections, we often have Jordan Henderson and James Milner forming a double pivot, which gives them an added player in the central area to then draw out opponents and create strong passing angles into these central areas. So what would then happen was the wide central midfielder would then be targeted and be drawn out into a central area for Liverpool to progress via the wide area. Now without Fabinho in the team, Liverpool had to make do with James Milner and Jordan Henderson, which is why we see a flexible double pivot in this game, especially in their build-up third when Newcastle try and press so intensely and higher up the field. Now as we look at another picture from Liverpool's build-up, we'll see the same shape with their initial line of build-up consisting of two central defenders and Alisson, and then their fullbacks playing in a wider and deeper role. And we see now Jordan Henderson playing as a lone single pivot and having the team be a bit more stretched because of their direct play in the second half and bypass the initial press of Newcastle in their first phase of build-up. So by pressing so intensely with a 4-3-3 with a flat 3 forward line, first line of pressure, they do leave space in the wide areas that Liverpool look to then exploit through pinning in the center and then through mid-range and long passes via the wide area. As we move forward into the midfield third now, their back four for Liverpool in this instance stays a bit deeper, even though the tendency for the fullbacks was to get much higher, but this would come on later when Liverpool would move into the opposing halves. Both fullbacks would then advance, and we would see then rotations start to occur with the midfield and forward players. But from here, Fabinho would then come on the field, playing as a lone holding midfielder, giving them clear connections from the central defenders past the first line of Newcastle's press, and with Newcastle's front three, having a lone holding midfielder creates these strong passing connections between defensive lines and forces Newcastle to come out a bit more in the midfield and stagger their midfield shape. This would then open up the center and the half spaces for diagonal passes to then be released and potentially progress through via Liverpool, and especially in wide areas when a player like St. Maximin would press from out to in using his cover shadow. They could offer the solution of Fabinho acting as an anchor and the pivot point to then connect these wide areas with their central defenders. We'll move into the final third. Against Newcastle's low block, we'll see them use a 4-5-1 to try and defend the 4-3-3 of Liverpool. Now in this example, we see a very clear and distinct structure with their three midfielders coming very flat within the team. This consists of Naby Keita and James Milner dropping alongside the single pivot of Jordan Henderson. And what this does is it frees up the fullbacks to then have more freedom to get forward and occupy full width higher up the field. Now between Gomez and then Andy Robertson occupying full width, it then forces the wingers to invert and play in a very well connected manner, which puts a lot of central players of this Liverpool team in the same area. Now what this does is it creates a hyper compact defensive setup for Newcastle, and they solve the false nine and dropping between the lines of the center forwards by having a staggered back four. So as long as they have cover between one central defender, the other is free to jump into the space between the lines. So this is then followed suit by a vertical partnership between the midfielders and the central defenders from a midfield 5 to a back 4. So we see John Joe Shelvey being the central player to jump to Jordan Henderson, who's then playing the ball to Naby Keita. So Newcastle do a very good job at maintaining the compactness and the connections between the lines not giving Liverpool any access points in these very dangerous areas because of these vertical partnerships with central defender jumping and John Joe Shelvey jumping. We also see a lot of different variations with these same structures, with Naby Keita able to drift into the wide area or Jordan Henderson to go up further in advanced areas, with James Milner then playing as a single pivot, with then also the threatening of depth through vertical runs and then horizontal movements to then occupy the space between the lines. So the fluidity and wide structures from these Liverpool teams is one of the hardest things for teams to defend against. And when we talk about the wide structures of Liverpool, we simply mean the three players that are closest to the wide area in the advanced places, and they are often very fluid in these areas and interchange their roles very well. Now with Newcastle in possession in their 4-3-3, we see them often go with a double pivot, which is quite clever from Newcastle because of the way that Liverpool press. Liverpool obviously press with a front three and using their central striker or Diego Jota to play in a deeper role to then cover one of the two holding midfielders. The other holding midfielder is then responsible for occupying a midfielder who's then going to jump into this area as play progresses. Now what this does is it creates a little gap in Liverpool's defensive setup and overstretches the connections, but which is often never exploited because of good defensive positioning and high intensity press that makes it very hard to find a good entry pass into these dangerous areas. But by going with a double pivot, it overloads the central striker for Liverpool and it creates more avenues for Newcastle to play through. And this is where we're going to wrap up the analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.